This is very exciting. And to go first, no pressure. All right. So the title, as the mayor so kindly said, Embracing Diversity, a tapestry of blended traditions. So I definitely want to first start out by saying thank you so much for being here today. This is quite the turnout. So thank you guys. I'm honored to share with you the beauty and the richness of my little family's unique traditions. As a single mother to my daughter, we've come to appreciate the power of tradition in shaping our lives and creating lasting memories by combining all of these things together. Our household is a beautiful blend of the Caribbean. So we have Puerto Rican and Haitian heritage, as well as Sephardic Jewish. In our household, tolerance is not just a value, but it's also the name of the game. And often I have her tell people, tolerance is the name of the game. So we've woven together cherished customs from our ancestors, creating a unique, vibrant mosaic of traditions. So throughout this little story, I want to take you on a voyage through our festive rituals, each one representing a piece of our cultural heritage. In our home, we celebrate the joyous festival of Hanukkah, a time when the flickering flames of the menorah illuminate our hearts with hope and unity. Each night, we gather around the menorah, my daughter's eyes sparkling with excitement as we light the menorah and the candle, recounting the miracle of oil that burned for 8 nights. Our kitchen becomes a hub of warmth and delicious aromas. I lost my place. Alongside the lighting of the menorah, we gather to prepare the traditional latkes and spin the dreidel to see who will win the gilts, or the chocolate coins. You can always find them at Trader Joe's if you're early. There's always one. We can have a little dance segment. Celebrating in these ways allow us to honor our Jewish heritage by passing on traditions that have been cherished by generations before us. But remember, in our household, there's more. So not just one holiday. As Christmas approaches, the air in our home fills with merriment and tantalizing scent of arroz con gondole, or rice with chickpeas, a beloved Puerto Rican dish. I always get the bagao, which is the crispy part at the bottom, which is delicious, if you didn't know that. Also, we make coquito. So think eggnog, but on steroids. Better. Much, much better, in my opinion. So your coquito is going to be a creamy kind of delicious drink that has coconut and nutmeg and cinnamon and sometimes rum for the grown-ups. So this is always something that the holiday season, not only drinking the eggnog, but making it, or the eggnog, the coquito, that makes me think of my family, and it's as though Titi Carmen or my abuela is there with us. It's something that we can do that brings our culture in. With our Haitian heritage, we've delved into the captivating world of folklore. In this, there is a story that is referred to as Bookie and Malice. This is a age-old tale that is typically, how do you translate? It talks about pranks and mischievous things. So oftentimes the parents or the grandparents or whoever's sharing this story will use it as a way to teach their child a lesson without being very direct. So I often use it in bedtime stories and do the same thing that my mother did, which you make it up as you go. So if they took a piece of candy without asking, Bookie and Malice then took a piece of candy in that story, and so forth. Of course, there's also Three Kings Day in our house, which is very, very common in the Caribbean. This tradition in our blended household, on January 6th, we celebrate the Three Kings by opening our stockings rather than putting our shoes at the edge of the bed for the trinkets and gifts that would normally be. So we have made it our own by doing our stockings on that day. In our home, we've created our own unique traditions, combining elements from our diverse backgrounds and making them our own. Basically what I just said to you. So our family traditions have become the threads that bind us together, a testament to the power of love and the strength of our shared values. They teach my daughter the importance of embracing diversity, fostering empathy, and appreciating the beauty that lies in every culture. So, as I stand before you today, going first, again, no pressure, I invite you to embrace your own family traditions, whether they stem from your cultural background, your personal beliefs, or a blend of different heritages. Let them be a testament to the power of unity and acceptance. May they bring you joy, love, and a sense of belonging to your lives, just as they have to ours. And I challenge you all to create your own tradition this year. So, thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for welcoming me here. It's a pleasure to be a part of this wonderful community. And if you didn't know the story, we did move from New York a few years ago. And actually, I lived in the Bronx and lived in New York for most of my life. So this was like a major move for us. So to tell you a little bit about my story, I'm pretty much going to wing it, but just bear with me. So my mother is from Finland and my father is from Cuba. And so I guess that would make me either Cubish or Finuba. Take your choice. So in Finland, there's a special tradition practiced on New Year's Eve called Tinan Valenta, which in English is translated to tin casting. And this tradition actually came to Finland in the 18th century from ancient Greece. So it's something that they practice year after year on New Year's Eve. And when my mother introduced it to my older brother and I thought, okay, let's see what mom's gonna pull out of her bag this time. So I was a little curious and intrigued by it, and she didn't really tell us too much of what she was about to do. So she, right before the New Year's Eve ball was about to drop in Times Square, so she got set up with a few things. She got a ladle and then a piece of tin and then a bucket of cold water. So my brother and I had no idea what she was up to. And I thought this was pretty weird. So she, explained to us that we're going to do something really special. So just pay close attention. And so she took the ladle, got that piece of tin, which in Finland, when you practice this tradition, you actually can purchase the tin, but it's in the form of a horseshoe, and it's symbolic of good fortune. So she took the piece of tin, put on the ladle, and then put it over a fire on the stove. And so we kind of just waited, with curiosity as to what was going to happen next. And then holding the ladle and the tin that melted, not too hot, she asked us to stand back. And we watched her and we thought, okay, this is going to be either really scary or really interesting. So she poured this melted tin into a bucket of cold water. And, if you're from New York, you're expecting fireworks, you're expecting smoke to come out of this bucket of water. And we just waited patiently. And so she gave it a couple of minutes and then reached down, pulled out the tin that had formed different shapes in the water from the water being in the cold water. And so she turned off the lights, which really spooked us. So we thought, all right, what's going to happen next? And she grabbed a flashlight. And so she got up against the wall and she held the tin there with the flashlight shining on it so that we could see the shadow of the tin. And so we're all just, kind of curious as to what was going to happen next. And so she turned it right, she turned it left, she turned it around, upside down. And then she said, I want you to look carefully. What do you see in the shadow? And my brother and I just kind of studied it carefully. And then as kids, being kids, we started to maybe, guess, oh, it looks like a dog. It looks like a baby carriage. And, it looks like a snake. And so she really said to us that this is what I want you to think about in terms of what this new year will bring you. So in the tradition, it's typical that if you were to see a square shape of the tin, then it would resemble or it would represent peace that you would receive for the next 12 months of the year. but it could also be maybe a bird, or it could look like a plane. And then that would indicate, oh, well, we're going on a trip this year. And then if there were a lot of bubbles in it and it looked a bit rough, then that meant that you were going to have a lot of wealth. So we were really excited about that. So my brother and I kind of, talked about it, and there was great conversation, lots of laughter, sometimes some arguments debating on what that thing looked like. But it was really this time that we spent together, my mother sharing her heritage, sharing these really wonderful traditions in her culture, and passing that on to not only myself, but then being able to do that with my kids as well. So as we enter this season of this new year, it's really about not so much about what that year is going to bring for you, but it really means more of what good fortune can you create within your families, and that really encompassing the love, the family, and the connection. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Ooh, so crowd out here. Okay. All right. So really quick, before I start my story, I just have to say, sorry, Dad, I did steal this a couple of years ago. It was his lake jacket. And if you look closely, there's stain or paint from all the times that he had to stain the deck or paint the cottage or anything. So anyway, sorry. He told me specifically not to steal this, and then I absolutely did. Yeah, he's here. He's back there. Steve Shaw. You can give a little wave. That's my dad. All right. So my grandmother, Nancy Shaw, once dreamed of having an A-frame cottage on a lake. So in the fall of 1959, my grandfather, Dr. Byers Wendell Shaw Sr., set out to build that A-frame for his wife and his 3 kids, one of which is my dad. They found land on Rocky Fork Lake. The plans were drawn up, and a construction crew was hired. My grandpa, who was a busy country surgeon for Washington Courthouse, would make that 40-minute drive from Washington Courthouse to the build site as often as he could to kind of help out with construction. He was a pretty handy guy. Later in life, he would carve pens and knives and give them out to anybody who would accept them. And I wonder what his drives to and from that building site were like. Was he tired? Did he get overwhelmed with all the decisions to be made, with the work to be done, the tasks to be completed? And as the cottage started to take shape, I learned that the family would camp on the platform that had been built. I imagine that sleeping there in a tent under the stars, under the trees, must have felt a little bit like you were living in your own treehouse or in your own fort. And then when it came time to build the deck off the back of the house, as the house itself came together, there was a dogwood tree that was out back. And I remember this very distinctly from my childhood, that there's an existing dogwood tree. And so my grandmother, who unfortunately I actually never got to meet, she died from lung cancer when my dad was 9. She insisted, do not take this tree down. You have to build the deck around this dogwood tree. And so even when I was a little kid, it's gone now, unfortunately, but when I was a little kid, at the lake, we would always just kind of marvel at the fact that there's this tree coming up through our back deck. Okay, so, and I think that dogwood tree really kind of added to that tree house or that kind of fort effect. So finally, in the spring of 1961, the cottage was complete. And again, I wonder, when my grandpa and my grandma walked into that house, into that cottage for the first time, did they even have any inkling of what they had built? Did they know that they had built this magic place where generations of Shaws would find belonging and joy? So fast forward about 30 years to my childhood, our entire extended family on my dad's side would get together every July 4th and Thanksgiving. Up until 1996, the cottage was just an A-frame. And then it got a much needed addition as our family started to kind of burst at the seams. But up until then, just kind of imagine this little A-frame. It had 2 bunk rooms, very small bunk rooms. It had a pull-out bed in the living space. And then in this loft area, there was just a whole bunch of twin-size beds, all just crammed in there for us to sleep in. And so we're just imagine these like 8 adults, 8 kids, all stuffed into this like little house, right? So we're kind of on top of each other. I imagine for the adults, like as a kid, I thought it was great. It was magical, right? But for the adults, I'm sure that they probably felt the stress of that every once in a while. Like, okay, we're on top of each other. So I see why they added onto it. Now, for me as a kid, the loft was like this really cool, magical place. Again, it kind of had that fort-like tree house feeling. It was packed with those bunk beds, like I mentioned, and that's where my sisters and my cousins and I would all sleep when we went to the lake. We built blanket forts and jumped on the beds when the parents weren't paying attention. And then at night, we would stay up way too late, whispering to each other and giggling. Inevitably, one of the boys would rile us up, and the kids in the back are going to like this, with loud farting. Yes, very loud. And so we'd all get a little riled up, right? And without fail, an adult would yell up at us to go to bed. Stop, calm down, be quiet. And, you know, maybe it would quiet down for a little bit. And then, of course, we got back into it. Eventually, we fell asleep, but, you know. And then all of this really continued through my teen years, even into my young adult ages, before I got married, all of that. And we would just continue to lie in those twin-sized beds, cracking jokes, having the best time with each other. The other thing that I want to share is that we had this tradition of hiking on Thanksgiving Day. Now, that sounds really lovely, right? Well, here's the thing, is that we would do this hike that was 2.2 miles long, which is not bad, right? Everybody's like, oh, this is doable. Well, here's the thing. The first, 1.25, 1.5 miles of this hike is just like a straight shot up, okay? It's like a climb. And it's called the Fort Trail at Fort Hill. And every year we'd load up the vans, go to it. All of us kids were like, oh my gosh, why are we doing this again? I don't even know when this started, but we were like, okay, we got to do this hike again. Uncle Ben says we have to. And so we gripe about it. And then, of course, we always had a good time, right? We hated it, but we loved it. We get up to the top and you're looking around. And if you haven't hiked at Fort Hill out in Hillsboro, check it out. It's great. And you get to the top and there's these beautiful views and you're just kind of looking around and you're seeing your whole family there. You're doing something together. And it's so beautiful. You just feel like you have this sense of belonging just through that hike. And you just realize how beautiful your family is. Okay, so third little section of my story is that on Wednesday, July 3rd of 2013, my grandfather died at home in Washington Courthouse at the age of 93. It was a good long life. The family had planned like usual to go and gather at the cottage for July 4th. I remember being so grateful that we would be together as we mourned the loss of our patriarch, the man whose dream made our tight-knit, unique family ties possible. Some of us were already at the cottage when we got the news, and I remember being so grateful for that too, to learn of my grandfather's passing in a place where I felt safe and I felt like I belonged somewhere. Now, the weather was really weird that July. It was rainy and kind of chilly, which is not usual for 4th of July, right? If we've been to the Independence Day event in Madeira, we know it's hot. If you've walked up the hill in the parade, you know it's hot. So it's kind of like the earth knew what it had been lost. And because it had been raining all day that next day on Thursday, on the 4th, we started to get a little restless because even though we had made this addition to the house, it's still, there's still like 1 million people there, right? Like there's 19 adults, 2 babies, 3 dogs, and probably like a partridge in a pear tree somewhere. So we were on top of each other and having to be cooped up inside all the time, especially when you're expecting to be out on the boat, hiking, whatever. We get a little restless. We feel like we're a little cramped, right? So what did we do? Someone, probably my dad, knowing how handy he is, came up with the idea to build some kind of structure outside because we had a deck and we had a front covered porch. But on the deck that kind of wrapped around the house, it did not have any kind of coverage. So we just had this like tiny little front porch to sit on outside. And they found some rope, some scrap wood, a huge tarp, and then just kind of fixed up this little adult fort for us to sit under as we shared stories with my grandfather and kind of shared in our grief. So that night, with the rain coming down all around us, we sat around and talked about how lucky we were, how what we had was so rare. An extended family that got together regularly and everyone loved it. I have been hearing all these stories from people they gripe when they had to go to family reunions. And for me, even to this day, it's like the best time of my life. We shared a lot of stories. Remember when Grandpa cooked those squirrel brains at Thanksgiving? True. The country man, okay? Remember when Grandpa got the Care Bear clock during the White Elephant gift exchange and he just loved it? Remember when Grandpa made turtle soup from what we think was an actual turtle, but we're still not actually sure? Remember how he water skied until he was 80 years old? Remember? In the midst of our grief, we found solace and we found joy. That night under our tarp fort, we belonged to each other. So to wrap it all up, because I'm going on too long, as I always do. So last fall, most of the family convened at the cottage for Thanksgiving for the first time since COVID. It was really meaningful. My cousins, my sisters, and I are all grown up with our own kids now. So these days, the next generation is up in that loft. They're the ones building the blanket forts, jumping on the beds when they think we're not looking, and resisting bedtime, of course.
Farting.
And probably farting, yeah. Absolutely. So on Thanksgiving night, after the kids had been put to bed, or so we thought, the adults were sitting around the kitchen table playing various games, Quirkle, which is my mother's favorite. Hi, Kimmy. Drinking wine and catching up. Every so often, we'd hear the giggles and chatter of the kids upstairs who should be asleep. So I remember my cousin Brad shouts up for them to go be quiet and go to sleep. This happened several more times, with a few of us even taking turns to go upstairs, shush them, tuck kids back into bed, etc. We'd collectively groan each time. Like, oh, why won't they just go to bed? Commiserating over the knowledge that our kids would likely be exhausted and probably cranky the next day. And wow, was that going to be a fun time. And yet, even through our exasperation that night and many others like it, we knew that with each giggle and whisper, our kids, these first and second cousins, were finding a sense of safety within the walls of our grandpa's dream, his fort, and belonging with each other. Thank you.
Did everybody hear me okay? Is it coming through? I don't like standing behind this thing, so I'm going to stand up here by Jonah. And before I do, can we just give a big round of applause for everybody who helped put this event on? Tom, Maria, the whole committee that did this. It's been done. Before I start, I want to dedicate this story to my mom. We lost my mom about 3 years ago, and she taught me a lot of things. One of the most important things was she taught me to be open to new experiences and new people. And I just can't thank her enough for that. So how many of you grew up in Cincinnati? How many of you are Cincinnati natives like me? Most of us here, right? So like Mayor said, my name is Jim Schwaller. I grew up near Forest Park in Springfield Township. And to be honest, I didn't even know where Madeira was until I was in high school. We were on the other side of town. I didn't make it over here a lot, but I'm glad I'm here now. I live. I grew up in a pretty traditional Midwestern family, but as I've grown and learned more about the world, I've learned that I'm not real sure what that means. And so let me explain what I mean when I say it. So I have traditions in our family. We had Thanksgiving with turkey and mashed potatoes, a big family sitting around the table. For Christmas, we had an even bigger family gathering with lots of lights, ornaments, a big inflatable Santa in the front yard, lots of kids running around. For the 4th of July, it was always itchy grass in Sharonville, watching the fireworks. And always on Labor Day, for the first 18 years of my life, did we go down to Riverfest and watch the fireworks off the barges. A very, very Cincinnati family. As I got into it, I wanted to explore the world and experience different things. I moved down south. I went to college, eventually to grad school, and I made my way out to Los Angeles, California, where I met my incredible wife, Maria. And if you remember Maria from the first storyteller, Maria is Chinese American. She shared her story in the first. And as we were falling in love, one of the things I really, really enjoyed about dating her and then eventually getting married and getting to know her family was learning more about her culture and where she came from. And for me, a kid from Cincinnati, was really intriguing, it was exciting, it was things that I had never experienced before, and I got to learn so much about. But in the excitement, there was also a lot of nervousness, and I was always afraid I would mess things up, that I might eat something the wrong way. And even to this day, my mother-in-law still makes my meals for me after, how long? 18 years of being together and dating, 17 years. And my mother-in-law will still put the food together because she thinks I can't do it. So I was always afraid I'd make the wrong joke. The family still to this day teases me about being the only white person in the family. Yet, eventually, I won them over and I became part of the family and I became part of their tradition. So when you think of Thanksgiving, what do you think of? Shout a few things out. Family, definitely. Turkey, football, yeah. Food is the big one, right? Absolutely. So I remember my first Thanksgiving, we went over to her uncle's house, and all I knew was that he was very, very strict. I had to be on my best behavior. I was in my late 20s, so I don't know why I still felt that way, but I did, and that's how he took it. And I remember walking into Al, and I met about 100 people that I had never met before, many who didn't speak English. And I remember looking over the spread of food and saying noodles, rice, variety of just delicious Chinese dishes, all very delicious, but I was not my right for Thanksgiving. Yeah. And I was really enjoying myself, but at the same time, I was missing my family. My dad's here tonight, missing my mom, missing my turkey. Salute. Until Maria took me into the kitchen and introduced me to her aunt, and then showed me the roughly 800 egg rolls that she had made for Thanksgiving dinner. And I would love to tell you that was an exaggeration, but this woman made hundreds and hundreds of egg rolls every Thanksgiving. These were not just everyday egg rolls. As soon as I bit into the first egg roll, I realized it was a piece of absolute and pure joy that this woman had poured her heart and soul into. And I stood there and probably ate 20 in a row. And I started to miss my turkey and mashed potatoes a little bit less with each one. The next year, as Thanksgiving came closer, I asked, "Are we going to Uncle's house again?" And of course we were. But more importantly, would there be egg rolls? There were, of course, probably 1,000 this time. Warm and flaky and just full of joy. Heavenly, absolutely heavenly. And with each year, the thoughts of my turkey and mashed potatoes slowly were replaced by thoughts of egg rolls. And to this day, my kids can attest to this, our family often doesn't have turkey on Thanksgiving, but we always have egg rolls. So as I learned more and more about Maria and her family, I was introduced to more and more celebrations, and eventually to one that has become really near and dear to my heart, the Lunar New Year. I remember the first time that we celebrated together, I I honestly had no idea what I was in for. And I didn't even know really what we were celebrating. So Maria took me to her parents' house on the eve of the Lunar New Year. When I arrived, I was given a bowl of shark fin soup, real shark fin soup. Now, we shouldn't eat real shark fin soup anymore, but it was amazing, absolutely amazing. And it really brought me closer to her family to share this truly special dish with them. Next, and this was before we were married, each of the married adults greeted me by saying, "Gung hei fat choi," and handing me a small red envelope. It's traditional that non-married people give a red envelope full of money to all of the non-married people who are younger than them. This is like the best holiday of our time. Finally, our family sat around and we played what we call the animal game. It's also known as lucky chess. So in this game, you have a stack of quarters or chips or coins in front of you, and you bet them on different animals. There's a water container up here, and one of the participants in the game rolls the dice, and whatever animals come up, you win quarters, and whatever animals or the water container don't come up, the person who rolled gets to eat the rest of the money. Now, this is not a quiet game at all. So what I really remember from that first time, this first Lunar New Year, was for hours sitting with two of my nieces on my lap, and I have three, and they would just rotate around and just yelling, screaming, "Rooster, rooster, bow, bow, crab, crab," and just laughing and all this joy and love. And it was amazing. And so when we lived in LA, I always looked forward to Lunar New Year, and it became one of my very favorite holidays. So when we moved here, Maria and I really, really wanted to make sure we didn't lose all of that joy and that love that came with the Lunar New Year. So every year on Lunar New Year, we make some chow mein. Really, Maria makes some chow mein. And hopefully some egg rolls. Sometimes I get bonus egg rolls on Lunar New Year. And we sit around and we play the animal game. And we've started a new tradition of inviting a family to come and join us for the Lunar New Year. And we get to share some of our traditions, which I absolutely love. Jimmy, you want to come up and help me with this part? Waiting for year. When is it? It's usually either the end of January or beginning of February, so it moves around a little bit each year. Yeah. So for us, the holidays really start around Wally, Thanksgiving time, which is the time of year, and then they go through, which is great. So we get an extended holidays. So being in LA with Maria, I was really, really immersed. Family, and my family was, hey, and I was really immersed in their cultures and their traditions and their celebrations. I really tried to embrace them. I loved it. Food was amazing. Traditions were fun. It was fantastic. And it never struck me for a long time that Maria might also want to learn some of mine. So growing up, Maria didn't celebrate Christmas. Her family was Buddhist, but as she became an adult, it became one of her favorite holidays. And so as she was learning about me, I wanted to introduce some of the traditions from my family. So one of the most important traditions in my family was an ornament that represented you. So this is my very first ornament. It's roughly 4 years old. It's not hurt. Or that I want to admit. This is the ornament from when we moved to Madeira to represent our moves. And this is our ornament from COVID. So for those in the back, we all have masks on. There's a roll of toilet paper and some hand sanitizer. So every year, each of us gets an ornament. And so it was, that was our our tradition. So when Maria and I got married, I was so excited. Shared this. We decided that we would save it for when we were first married. It was our first Christmas together as a married couple. And I thought for weeks, what ornament I should get her. And so eventually I landed on a camera because she was into photography. She had started a photography company that year, and she was so excited about it. And she's incredibly talented, by the way. She really is. And so I scoured the internet and I found this camera. Oh, not lose that one. Found this camera that looked as much like her beloved Canon Mark 3D as it could, right? So I worked hours and hours on this. And when we exchanged gifts, I would like to show you the $2 penguin that Maria bought from Target. So I have no idea why. Yeah, it's United Australia. And it took a little practice, but Maria eventually got into the tradition and really loved it. And it was really highlighted for me when so I flew across the country with the kids when we moved here from California, and Maria came in our minivan a few days later. She drove across the country. And when she got here, the first thing she showed me that she had gotten during her drive across the country was a ornament from Arches National Park. She wanted that to represent her trip and our journey and our coming to Madeira. So just this past weekend, we put up our Christmas tree, which is now full of memories. We told the kids a few stories, including the one about Mommy driving across the country. So, like I said, Maria and I have 2 kids now, Jimmy and Evie. And we love these traditions. We eat egg rolls for Thanksgiving, play the animal game, and hand out red envelopes every Lunar New Year. And like I said, just a few days ago, we hung all our ornaments on the tree and we told stories. And our family traditions really brought together the best of both of us. And it took time, but as we learned about each other, we really found the best ways to celebrate and come together. And each year, these traditions help bring us even closer. And I wanted to tell this story because I think that's really true about all of us. The more we take time to understand each other, the more we can celebrate together. And the traditions become a lot less about repetition and doing them every year, and a lot more about spending time with the people you love. And of course, about egg rolls. Thank you. Bye.